My name is Filip Tomaszewski. I'm the co-founder of companies that have been designing, distributing, and delivering state-of-the-art serious games, training simulations for more than 15 years now. I don't appear that old, but yeah, that's what we've been doing for the past 15 years. Yeah, and if you're familiar with the concept of the flow, you're well aware that we enter this blissful zone only when we are faced with challenges that are slightly too hard for our current level of skills. When this happens, we get engaged so immensely that we lose track of time, but most of all, we are focused in order to gain this next level of skills necessary to fulfill the task at hand. Whether it's some sort of athletic activity, a board game, a task at work, it's so much more fun to be in the flow zone. And even mundane tasks may appear interesting if they are served in a manner that makes fulfilling them a blast. In the book titled The Total Engagement, there have been described 9 factors that make hundreds of thousands of players engaged in MMORPG games. This phenomenon is interesting business-wise because in those games, the players often have to do really dull jobs. And not only aren't they paid for it, but many times they are the ones who pay to do it and to be in the game. Now, isn't it the holy grail of motivation, especially for HR people? Yeah. One of the key engagement factors is the increasing level of difficulty. It keeps players engaged, makes them want to develop their skills, and whenever they reach the necessary skill level, there comes another difficulty that puts them again out of their comfort zone. Good games have these levels calibrated well, so it's not too hard, because this would make too many players abandon the game, but also it cannot be too easy for too long time, because that is simply too boring. When designing serious games, we use this knowledge at Pracownia Gier. By 2015, we had gathered extensive experience in designing serious games to develop soft skills such as communication, collaboration, negotiation, time management, strategic thinking, and many, many others. And then at that time, we started wondering whether we are capable of developing a game that could assess skills. So not only development skills, but also assessing skills. Skills assessment is a really important field, especially in business. You want to have the best employees and managers so they can deliver business goals. On the other hand, skills assessment is either not reliable or very expensive. So we set up a challenge for ourselves to design an online assessment by means of a serious strategic game. And when we thought about it, we knew that it needed to be time and cost efficient because you don't want to spend too much for assessment skills. Scalable. 5 people, 1,000 people doesn't have to make a difference. It shouldn't make a difference. It should be accurate. This tool should be accurate because you care about the skills that you want to assess. It should be reliable because you need to rely on the results. And last but not least, it has to be engaging because you want the best candidates to apply, especially ones who don't yet realize they are the best. And after more than 2 years of research development project that cost around €1 million, we have come up with Archipelago Competence Game. And let me just show you the movie clip. I hope it will work well.
Decided to establish dozens of luxurious residences on man-made islands. They are to become the best addresses in this part of the world. That's why the investors wish to attract rich and famous customers. Prestigious residences.
This is how the game looks like.
Already await our guests. The problem now is a lack of clients. And that's exactly where you are badly needed. You work as an estate agent. Your job is to choose from variety of locations and offer your customers residences that best fit their needs. It's not an easy task, and many challenges lie ahead of you. How to face them?
Yeah, that is how the game looks like. Let me just come back to the presentation. Yeah, so we have come up with a virtual skills assessment by means of an engaging online simulation game. And how did we fulfill the task? It's time and cost efficient, at least 20 times cheaper than assessment center. It takes 2 hours instead of 2 days. It's scalable. The more people play, the better. It's accurate. It has proven correlation with ACDC. It's reliable. We can rely on the assessment, especially at a large scale. And last but not least, it's engaging. It's fun, it's challenging, and it's considered innovative. The name of the game transmits one of its unique features. It's a competence game, a game that develops skills. But not only that, it's also a sophisticated diagnostic tool that can diagnose players' competencies based on their behaviors displayed throughout the game. I will not describe how it's possible here. It's a separate story with some serious science behind it. But just to let you know, it can measure 12 skills in 3 areas. It's defining and achieving goals, systems thinking, and customer orientation. And all this we can measure in a time span of 2 hours of a engaging simulation. What are the applications of this kind of game? We and our clients use it in several areas. Most of all, soft skills trainings aimed at developing skills in areas like goal orientation, systems thinking, client orientation. Engaging recruitment processes, where the game is used as one of the assessment center tools. It gives a valuable insight into employees' skills profile, but also it's a neat feature that makes the employer brand stand out and attract best people on the job market. And the third area would be diagnosing the skills potential of the organization in order to design development paths, but also establish some skills benchmarks. I'm going to tell you now 3 stories that show different aspects of engagement. The engagement of a player in the process that he or she takes part in, the engagement of a player in the game, and the engagement in the world of sales. So let me start with the first story. Being the author of a game makes you biased. You put €1 million to design a terrific game experience. You got to convince first clients that your tool is so amazing that the candidates will be swarming in. The client then releases recruitment announcement and sends out invitation to the game to all the people who apply. And only 40% get to finish the game. Most of the remaining 60% don't even bother to click the link. When we learned about it, we were both astonished and scared. Astonished because why the heck could anyone pass such a valuable experience? And scared because we imagined that a response rate this low would be considered a failure. And that is where we were wrong. Sometimes you need to take a broader perspective to evaluate something, and that is what our client did. Besides looking at the response rate, that they also looked at the whole recruitment pipeline. Before they had a decent number of applications, they set up an interview with the branch manager, and what they were faced with was an annoying absence rate. So many people who were supposedly applying for a job just didn't show up. The branch manager got angry. The duration of the recruitment process extended, and eventually the efficiency of the process was below expectations. On the other hand, when they used the competence game, the recruitment announcement that contained information that an online game will be one of the key elements of the process attracted many candidates. But most importantly, every candidate who took part in the game showed up at the interview. Playing the game made them engage in the process. They were interested in hearing feedback on how they did in the game. Many times they asked whether they could play once again. And the bank hired the ones with the most adequate skills profiles. So it's a win-win situation, but obviously not for these guys who skip the game. Yeah, this is one of the testimonials. I like the game, surprised me many times, and I couldn't foresee what to expect. The final report was icing on the cake. I read it carefully, and I find this information very helpful. I will eagerly use them in other recruitment processes. But not every time a candidate who doesn't show up means necessarily a bad thing. Once I was recruiting for a sales position in our company, whenever we start a recruitment process, the competence game comes in handy, and we almost always use it at some stage to x-ray the skills profile. This time it wasn't different. One of the candidates, a 25-year-old lady, took part in the process. I invited her to the game. She played the game. It appeared that she did pretty well in the game, and we set up a job interview at 9 a.m. That day, I came to the office earlier than usual and was awaiting her in my room. At 5 to 9, I got an email from her. She apologized me for not being able to show up. She had given it much thought, as she wrote. She wrote that the game was a very valuable experience for her. It was difficult but bearable, but what was important to her and what she came to understanding is that the world of sales, guessing clients' needs, stressing out over their satisfaction is by no means a world for her. That said, she politely thanked me for allowing her to arrive at this insight and just bid farewell. And we both were saved much time by this realization. I didn't have any negative emotion towards her and this situation. It was really valuable for me too, as an employer who just saved so much time and energy on the recruitment process and onboarding. Yeah, and the world of sales depicted in the Archipelago game was not for her, but there are many people for whom these challenges are everyday bread. And the game of sales is basically their game, acquiring new clients, guessing clients' needs, closing the deals, meeting the targets. This is actually my world as well. I come from the sales, and I was the one behind the game concept of Archipelago. Many years ago. Yeah, and when this kind of people get to play the Archipelago, the world outside ceases to exist. They lose track of time, they learn the rules of the game, they try to power game them, and they get creative, they cannot stop playing, and it's already 3 a.m. Sounds familiar? Yes. Yes, they are in the flow zone, but also they're in their element. They were warned but they underestimated the challenge. I've seen it lots of times. Big shots, sales executives, more than 15, 20 years of experience managing big sales teams. They've seen a lot, they experience a lot, they know their trade, and the industry is actually secondary. We meet them, this type of people, during our sales process, where we try to convince them to implement the competence game in their organization. They usually want to try it out themselves. When they hear about it, when they hear about the sales online game, they usually imagine it will be some sort of trivial riddle, a quiz, nothing particularly challenging nor interesting, but they keep listening to our presentation of the value proposition behind the competence game, and they ask for the activation link. So on our next meeting, they tell similar stories. They say they left playing the game till the very end, being busy and so on, occupied. They just left it to the very end. And when they started playing, they were simply mind blown. The level of complexity of the game, which is more complex than they suspected, but still bearable. The challenges within the game that are so much like what they face with every day. They appreciated the level of difficulty that glued them to the screen. So they stayed up all night, red eyes, and just trying to beat themselves round after round. Yes, these were these 3 stories of engagement around competence game. One that is within the game, one is some kind of a meta index. It was very surprising to us that not only do we measure the skills that we are able to measure, but also this meta index of engagement that's so important and so valuable information, especially in the recruitment process. So if you have any questions, I'll be more than happy to answer.
Great, thank you, Philip. That's a very, very, very interesting indeed, and fantastic to see that game Archipelago live from the YouTube. I thought very interesting the story of the lady who didn't turn up to the interview because. So, I mean, have you for businesses that would want to try this approach, so marketing teams that say we do better essentially it's a type of test, isn't it? It's a pre test before
behavioral test.
Yeah, behavioral test. So have you been able to sort of work out in terms of selling that type of approach into a recruitment team what the sort of the ROI, the return on investment is in terms of save time, but in terms of triaging them? Is that a one way to sell it in?
This is one of the ways, actually. This insight that you get from the report on a candidate is really valuable and very unique, especially considering young people like 25, 26 years old with no substantial work experience. Their CV is kind of like empty. And if we are able to get this insight into their skills profile, then we have this unique opportunity to cherry pick the best people out of this age cohort at a pretty reasonable price, because not having this experience makes them underrated in a way on the job market.
Yeah, I mean, I particularly liked your point about the game. By the game being engaging, it helped find those candidates who needed a bit more encouragement than perhaps the other ones who are more sort of forthright. Couple of questions here from our audience. There's 2 that I'm going to take together, if I may, Jesse and Antonina's. Where next really for Competence Game and Archipelago? Is there a chance to apply this in different functions or different areas beyond sales?
Well, the world depicted in the game is purely B2B sales consultancy process with all sorts of gathering marketing information, sales information, and trying to apply it in the sales process. But the skills that we measure are universal. I mean, systems thinking. You need managers who are able to think in a time perspective. Client orientation. This area of skills is very crucial in terms of marketing, but also we don't measure interpersonal skills here. We focus on this ability to abstract your clients, whether they're internal or external clients, and assign them to different segments that have different needs. So it can be useful in marketing, but also within the whole organization. Goal orientation. There are some jobs that need people who are very goal-oriented, but also there are some jobs that don't have the goals defined well. The goals are changing, so it's a reverse thing now. with this kind of a job where you don't have strictly assigned goals, people with a high level of this skill can be annoyed by this kind of working environment. So it would be better perhaps to invite people who are not that skilled in this area.
Interesting. And yeah, so interesting. And so it does depend on who. Well, so in terms of applicability,
because the skills are contextual.
Yes,
and that's very important. In some places, high level of this kind of skill is important, but not in every position.
Yeah, very good. And finally, last question, just while we've got one more minute. So Eric is asking, are there conclusions on the differences of data collected with online games like this versus a kind of a traditional face-to-face part of the process?
That was the part of the research and development project actually, and one of the stages was the comparative research, where we put around 80 people through old school traditional way assessment center. And they spent 2 days in the classroom being assessed by 6 assessors. The assessors came up with the reports on their skills, and these people play the game as well, and we compared the results and looked for correlations. And not every skill that we imagined and dreamed about being able to measure we succeeded at. The learning agility, which was at that time very en vogue skill, we couldn't validate it. We weren't able to prove that this game of ours actually is able to assess learning agility skill.
Yeah, very interesting. So perhaps there's a complementariness. So they're using these different things. Well, Philip, thank you so much indeed. A big round of applause to you.
Thank you, Debbie.
Applause from the chat as well, please.